What happens when a dream walks onto a stage already judged before it can breathe? What happens when a voice carries years of silence, hunger, and hope, and the world is not ready to listen? On one bright stage filled with lights, cameras, and expectations, a man stood alone. Not famous. Not powerful. Not confident in the way the world understands confidence. His name was Marco Reyes, a Filipino street performer who grew up singing to cracked mirrors and empty alleys. He was known for one thing only, his deep love for Elvis Presley. To many, that love looked outdated. To some, even laughable. Marco was quiet, gentle, and deeply emotional, the kind of person who felt everything but spoke very little. Behind him was the invisible presence of Lena Reyes, his mother. A hard-working woman who raised him alone, strong on the outside, soft at heart. She believed in her son even when belief felt foolish. Her faith was silent but unbreakable. And sitting far away, behind a long judge's desk, was Simon Cowell, sharp-eyed, honest to the point of fear, a man known for breaking dreams with a single look. Calm. Controlled. Unimpressed by stories. Interested only in truth. As Marco walked forward, the air felt heavy. Not because of tension, but because of doubt. The audience saw his clothes before his soul. They saw his nervous steps before his courage. They saw Filipino Elvis and assumed imitation, not emotion. Some smiled. Some whispered. Some expected failure. But what if they were wrong? What if this was not about copying a legend, but honoring one? What if this was not about talent, but survival? What if a song could carry a lifetime of pain and still sound beautiful? Under the bright lights, Marco's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear of the judges, but from the weight of being unseen for so long. This was not just an audition. This was a quiet man asking the world for one honest minute. And no one, not the audience, not the cameras, not even Simon Cowell, was ready for what was about to happen next. Because sometimes, the most powerful voices come from the people everyone has already decided to ignore. Marco Reyes had spent most of his life standing in places where no one really looked at him. He was 32 years old, lean from years of walking long distances, with tired eyes that carried both kindness and quiet disappointment. Marco lived in a small rented room on the edge of Manila, where the walls were thin and the nights were loud. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, not because he wanted to, but because life demanded it. By day, Marco worked odd jobs. Helping vendors set up stalls, carrying boxes at local markets, sometimes cleaning tables at roadside cafes. The pay was never steady. Some days, it was just enough for food. Other days, it was barely anything at all. Yet no matter how hard the day had been, Marco always ended his evenings the same way. He sang. Not for money. Not for attention. But for peace. In quiet streets or empty corners, he would close his eyes and sing Elvis songs softly, almost like a prayer. His voice was deep but gentle, shaped by years of singing alone. Music was the only place where he felt understood. Marco was not loud or proud. He avoided crowds and rarely spoke about his dreams. When people laughed at his Elvis-style singing, he smiled politely and moved on. He had learned early that explaining himself only made the pain louder. Inside, though, he carried a storm. He worried about his mother's health. He worried about rent. He worried that time was slipping away. Some nights, doubt crept in quietly. Maybe he was too old. Maybe the world had already chosen not to hear him. Maybe dreams were meant only for other people. Still, Marco held on to small habits that kept him grounded. He fixed his worn shoes instead of replacing them. He saved old song recordings on his phone like treasures. He practiced in front of cracked mirrors, imagining stages he had never seen. Right now, standing on the biggest stage of his life, Marco felt both heavy and hopeful. heavy with every failure behind him. For Marco Reyes, the hardest battle was never poverty or exhaustion. It was being invisible. All his life, Marco had lived on the edge of other people's attention. Not ignored with cruelty, but overlooked with ease. People passed him every day without learning his name, without hearing his story, without noticing the quiet effort it took just to keep going. Music was the only thing that made him feel real. Yet even that had slowly become a source of pain. Years ago, Marco had tried to share his voice more openly. He had joined small local contests, street shows, and community events. Each time, the reaction was the same. People smiled politely, then suggested he sing something more modern. Some laughed gently, calling him Elvis from the streets. Others said his passion was impressive, but unrealistic. Every comment stayed with him. Over time, Marco began to shrink himself. He sang softer. He stood farther back. He stopped believing that his voice could ever carry him forward. The dream that once burned bright became something he hid, even from himself. The weight grew heavier when his mother fell ill. Medical bills replaced savings. Singing time was replaced with extra work. Marco watched his dreams pause while life moved on without waiting for him. Regret crept in quietly, regret for chances not taken, for fear that held him back, for believing he had waited too long. Loneliness followed. Friends drifted away. Nights grew longer. Some evenings, Marco sat alone in his room, listening to old Elvis recordings, wondering if passion without progress was just another form of failure. The central question haunted him constantly. Was he chasing a dream, or running from reality? Applying for the audition had not felt brave. It felt desperate. A final reach before letting go. Marco didn't expect victory. He expected closure. He wanted to know, once and for all, if his voice was meant to be heard beyond empty streets. Standing backstage, that fear returned stronger than ever. What if they laughed? What if Simon Cowell dismissed him in seconds? What if this moment confirmed every doubt he had ever carried? Yet beneath the fear was something stubborn. A quiet refusal to disappear. This audition was not about fame. It was about proving, to himself, that his life had not been wasted. And that need, more than hope, pushed him forward. The moment Marco Reyes stepped fully into the light, something inside him shifted. The noise of the room faded. The weight of expectations dissolved. For the first time, he was not thinking about judgment. He was thinking about survival. As the music began, Marco closed his eyes for a brief second. Not to escape, but to remember. He remembered singing in narrow streets, his mother listening from a distance. He remembered nights when hunger sat beside him while music kept him company. He remembered every laugh, every doubt, every quiet failure. And then he sang. Not like someone copying a legend. Not like someone trying to impress. He sang like a man telling his life story through sound. His voice came out steady, deep, and raw. It carried age, struggle, and honesty. There was no force in it, only truth. Each note felt heavy with meaning, as if it had been waiting years to be released. The audience's expressions changed slowly. Smiles disappeared. Whispers stopped. Eyes widened. This was not what they expected. Marco did not move much. He did not perform. He stood still, letting the song do the work. The vulnerability in his voice filled the room, touching places people didn't realize were still open. And at the judges' table, something rare happened. Simon Cowell stopped writing. He stopped leaning back. He stopped looking bored. For the first time that day, Simon leaned forward. There was no mockery in his eyes. No dismissal. Only focus. His expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief, then to something deeper, respect. The song grew stronger, not louder. The emotion sharpened, not forced. Marco was no longer singing for approval. He was singing because this was who he was. In that moment, Marco understood something clearly. He had never been invisible. He had just been unheard. As the final note faded, the silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. Sacred. The kind of silence that means something has landed exactly where it needed to. Marco opened his eyes. And for the first time in his life, the world was looking back at him, truly looking. That realization changed everything. Marco Reyes did not walk onto that stage to become famous. He walked onto it to be seen. What happened next was bigger than applause, bigger than judges, and bigger than a single performance. That moment became a reminder of something the world often forgets, that talent does not always arrive polished, confident, or perfectly timed. Sometimes, it arrives tired. Marco's journey teaches a quiet but powerful lesson. Dreams do not expire just because life becomes heavy. Passion does not lose value just because it waits in silence. And a person's worth is never decided by how many people are watching. For years, Marco believed the world had moved on without him. He believed he was too late, too different, too ordinary to matter. But the truth was simpler and kinder. He was always enough. He just needed one moment of courage to step forward. The audience did not change Marco's life that day. Marco changed his own life by refusing to disappear. This story is not about Elvis. It is not about Simon Cowell. It is about anyone who has ever been overlooked. It is about the quiet worker with a hidden talent. The dreamer who keeps going without applause. The person who almost gave up, but didn't. Sometimes, the world laughs because it does not understand. Sometimes, doubt is louder than belief. But courage is not about being fearless. It is about showing up even when fear is certain. Marco reminded us that the most powerful moments are not loud. They are honest. And when honesty meets opportunity, even the strongest critics are forced to listen. So if you are holding a dream in silence, remember this. You do not need permission to matter. You do not need approval to be real. And you are never invisible when you choose to be brave. Because somewhere, someone is waiting to hear a voice just like yours.